And as introduced, I'm Heidi Layen, and I come from the University of Jyväskylä. And my area is sustainable and global education, and mainly on a social and cultural issues. But as we also heard in the previous presentation, I think these areas, the cultural, social, economic, and ecological, we cannot separate them, but they are all intertwined. It's our 106th Independence Day today in Finland, and it's a public holiday, and I'm giving this talk from a very rural area of Finland in a southwest coastal region, and it's -10 outside at the moment. So greetings from Finland. My talk is based on these two initiatives that I've been part of. One of them is a book chapter that we wrote on a planetary well-being, and what does the education for planetary well-being mean, and I will talk a little bit about the concept of the planetary well-being. And then more importantly, for the past 3, coming soon for the 3rd year, I've been running this Education for Emergencies research project, which is funded by the CHINTL, which is a global innovation network for teaching and learning, funded by the Ministry of Education and Culture in Finland. Our University of Jyväskylä is coordinating the research and teaching collaboration with India, and then also University of Helsinki is coordinating research and teaching collaboration with African continent and China. So we started with phase 1 on defining the terms, looking into what does the education for emergencies and what is the role of education, and specifically teacher education during the times of emergencies. Started when we were coming out of the pandemic, and then there have been and there will be kind of unforeseen events caused by different both conflicts but also the climate. So we started with defining these terms, then looking into the pedagogical principles, which we are ending now, and then I will also towards the end present this initiative that we'll take on with Kerala on a climate change pedagogy, but with this CHINTL collaboration. This is the reason why I'm here with you today, and it's been really interesting to listening, because a lot of the kind of the questions and challenges that has been discussed this morning or in your seminar are the ones that we are also tackling. But talking about education for emergencies, kind of also looking into and realizing that the emergencies, they look different in different parts of the world, and it's very important that we learn to understand one another and working together towards a similar goals. And then when we started to look into this education for emergencies, we also looked into the meanings, because also realizing that we can talk about emergencies, but when they become long-term, it becomes a crisis. And this is something that we, for example, are experiencing now with the climate, that it is a climate crisis. It's long-term, it's ongoing, and it's a prolonged disruption that looks different to different people in different parts of the world. And then we know that the sustainability education, it's been ongoing for quite a long time, but yet we have not been able to tackle the issues of the, for example, climate crisis. So in the University of Jyväskylä and also the Barcelona Pompeu Fabra University, they have started to work on this term planetary well-being, meaning the highest attainable standard of well-being for humans and non-human beings and their social and natural systems. So instead of only thinking about the humans and how, you know, how we can kind of build a understanding between the humans, we also have to think about how we interact with the whole system with other species, also becoming aware of that humans, we can also be distinct. So what do we have to do in terms of understanding the kind of having a dialogue and interaction between the not only humans but more also a little bit towards the post-humanism and understanding us just as a humans as a small part of the whole system. And I think also I'm giving this talk from a Western perspective, so I also feel like us, I mean, in the West, a lot of the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Sustainable Development Goals are also developed by the supranational organizations, and in a sense, like we are trying to solve these issues, but we also need to become aware that we are a big part of also in how we have come to this nature disaster, and kind of like becoming aware that even when we talk about humans as humans, that we are not equally positioned in the different emergencies and crises, but we need to actually voice those whose voices have been marginalized. And so the University of Jyväskylä has started this planetary well-being initiative, where first it was writing and defining the term and understanding what the planetary well-being means. Then the further steps have been creating studies around the planetary well-being. So at the moment, also our university is going through a curriculum revision. So starting fall, before we will implement new curriculum. The new curriculum will have 1 credit point of planetary well-being compulsory for all the students who are doing undergraduate studies in our university. There's also 3 additional credits that are voluntarily. And at the moment, also I'm part of this team planning a multidisciplinary sustainable transitions basic studies specialization that will be opened for the basic or for the undergraduate level studies. And our faculty in this curriculum revision process, we are implementing 5 credit compulsory course on responsible and sustainable professionalism. And in our faculty, we have 3 departments. We have the education, teacher education, and then psychology. So it will, in that sense, also be interdisciplinary course on responsible and sustainable professionalism. So these are the initiatives that are taking in place at the moment. But as we know, always, and what we also have to be aware of, that changing the terms doesn't help, because sustainable development education and sustainable development goals are nothing new, and specifically the kind of the environmental aspect. Already in the 1970s, Club of Rome limits of growth announced that we have to implement environmental education into the curriculums around the globe. But now in 2023, we are experiencing the climate crisis in different levels in different parts of the world, and so has the education for sustainable development. It has existed between 2005 and 2014, and the focus has been a lot to education to improve the common understanding of the importance of the environment. But yet nowadays we are working on this education for sustainable development in relation to the UN development goals with the 2030 target. And with that, in our university, we've kind of been thinking that the environmental education is not enough. Knowing about these things is not enough, but we need to also think about how we teach these topics, because also the reality is that we've known a lot. We know how we can create a better future, but for some reason we are not acting towards it. And I think there's also this idea that there's a variety of terms and ideologies in relation to the sustainable development education, or to the education for planetary well-being. And as we know, the Agenda 2030 development goals is an agreement to implement sustainability across the different levels of education, from early childhood education to higher education and adult education. And these are also visible in our national curriculum across the education sectors. But then further, these should be, and they are, a contemporary commitment to transform society towards resilience, equality, and safety. And I think we have already mentioned this, or was it in the previous presentation also, the UNESCO's aim, learning towards sustainability, must prepare students and learners of all ages to find solutions for the challenges of today and the future. Education should be transformative, which is very complicated, as we know that there are communities that are struggling with overall with education, and allow us to make informed decisions and take individual and collective action to change our societies and care for the planet. So also there's this kind of I think a critical moment where we have to really think that what's the aim of the education. If we aim for this transformative education, then is the content focused teaching enough? And also earlier in the panel discussion, and there was mentioning this, how, what is measured in education? What are the outcomes of education? We know how to measure literacy, math, science, but how would it look like if we started to measure, for example, how we exist as human beings in relation to the planetary system? And then also, what's the purpose of education? Is it to provide cognitive knowledge, or what does this transformativity actually means, and how do we create this transformative learning in the schools across the education? And this is really important question for the teacher education and teacher education for planetary well-being. The shift from solely focusing on the content, but how do we create the transformation? And I think, if we had solved this question, we wouldn't be here, but that's probably the most difficult questions in education. And then looking into the previous research, for example, in also in Finnish teacher education and sustainable development education in Finnish teacher education, the reason why it is important, and why we now, when we are renewing the curriculum, we have to critically look into the sustainable development or the planetary well-being aspect in teacher education, is that the young people are dependent on the decision of the adults. Children and young people, the way how they see the future, they have nowadays a lot of concerns and worries about the future, because the world doesn't look as positive as it used to. Especially also from our perspective, we have now, there has been conflict all over the world all the time, but now the conflicts are also very close to us, because we share the 1,300 kilometers of border with the Russia. So the Ukraine-Russia war is very close to us, and it also impacts the nature. We often talk about the loss of humans, which is really awful, but then also wars and conflicts are also a natural disaster, and at the same time also again, going back to the question that what is the aim of the education, that I think like peace education should be the focus, not so much. It is very important that we know how to read and count and so forth, but also if we cannot build a peaceful societies, we will destroy our planet. And then also children and women are more vulnerable, on also other species. What are the vulnerable species around us? And how do we become aware? How can we understand not only the humans, but the kind of the systems around us? And then also, how do we educate teachers to actually becoming aware of the conditions of their students? And then also our students, they have a concern that how to react to the situations where there's gaps in beliefs between the home and schools. And I think that was also raised in the panel earlier. So in our current system, our Finnish education policies have a history of promoting internationalization, global and sustainable education, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So those have been always kind of the fundamental things in our curriculum. Our curriculums are quite normative because we have the master's degree level teachers in Finnish schools. So the teachers have a lot of the autonomy in how they implement the curriculum, but the sustainable development goals and the human rights are kind of the guiding principle of the national curriculum. And our current national curriculum for basic education states that the global education sets the ground for justice and sustainable development based on the UN developmental goals. And the schools can freely engage to these goals locally or in international collaboration. However, the research also shows that these different aspects of sustainability, the cultural, socio-economic and ecological, they are kind of written in silos in the curriculum. So the cultural and social sustainability is a lot of in terms of the diversity of the students and maintaining the cultures of the students through education. And then the environment and the economic bodies is mainly involved in the Agenda 2030. So in that sense also there's this gap in between the different areas of sustainability. The Finnish education overall follows the Nordic welfare model, which rests on the values of democracy and equality, which means that since the formulation of the current education system since the 1970s, it started in 1968 and then by the 1970 the basic education started to be free for everybody in the Finnish context. So the equality means the free access to education for any children who are occupying the territory. So what we have done is that with this planetary well-being concept, so that the concept doesn't become an empty signifier in education, we wanted to look into what does the current curriculum or curricula for teacher education in the Finnish teacher education. We have 8 universities, traditional universities educating teachers. We chose 4 of them, University of Lapland, University of Jyväskylä, University of Tampere and Helsinki. And we looked into how the sustainable development goals are embedded in teacher education, and then what would need to take place in terms of the planetary well-being. So Finnish teachers hold a master's degree certificate, and the Finnish teacher education is research oriented and based on an idea of continuous professional development. We are also celebrating the 100th teacher education this year, and the teacher education started from our University of Jyväskylä. So when we looked into these 4 different teacher education curricula, and it is important to acknowledge that it's set by law what each of the curricula for teacher education programs need to have, and then the universities can kind of design the curriculum, but it needs to have the certain components. And so in that sense, also the teacher education programs, no matter which university you are in, they look quite similar. in terms of the content. But we look into the sustainable education. We use these words kestävä kehitys, which is in Finnish, and then also because we have Swedish as an official language, so we also looked into the same term, sustainable development in Finnish language, Swedish language, and in English from these curricula. And then also we looked into environmental education and climate change. And kind of these preliminary thoughts from the analysis is that that the sustainable development was not very systematically embedded in the curricula in these 4 universities. So they were often included in the multidisciplinary, meaning the arts or the home economics, handcraft, and that's in a classroom teacher education. And this was very specific in the subject teacher education that that these were the sustainable development goals were typically mentioned as a concept amongst others, and also in the multidisciplinary areas, like and specifically in home economics it was quite visible, which is quite understandable, but as it should be kind of overall embedded in everything, this was something that we didn't find. And it was interesting also that when it was mentioned in a curriculum of the degree program, so there's always the degree program curriculum, kind of the module, and then there are these different study units. So if the sustainable development goal was mentioned in a degree program or in a study unit, it was not mentioned in the course specific competence objectives or the contents. And then another way around, that when it was not mentioned in the degree program or study unit, it was somehow embedded in the content of the study or in the objective. So and that was even more common, that it was not as learning outcome mentioned in the program or the study unit, but then the materials were somehow signaling that the sustainable development goals are somehow embedded. So going forward with the curriculum revision, we really need to pay attention that how to embed the planetary well-being into across the disciplines in the teacher education. We have, when we looked into this curricula, the University of Lapland, they have a specific program on sustainability and nature education. So it means that the teacher education program is focused on sustainability. So some students can choose this track of sustainability and nature education in the teacher education program, and it was most comprehensively taught in this degree program. So maybe it's also something that we can learn from. And then, as I mentioned, also how the University of Jyväskylä is nowadays implementing these planetary well-being courses. The universities had some separate voluntary courses or minor study modules in sustainable development and global education, but not as it should be embedded across the curriculum. So then I think going forward with this planetary well-being for teacher education,
Heidi, your time is almost up.
Okay, yeah, I have a few more slides. I will conclude. So then the big question is what happens next and what can we do about it? So we cannot go back to the same steps how we ended up here. So it also means for us in the Western context to understand our role in this, and as was also mentioned in the previous presentation, the indigenous people's knowledge and the way how they coexist with the nature is something that we should possibly learn from. Especially Finland, we have colonized the Sami people, our indigenous peoples, who still has this like a more embedded coexistence with the nature in their lives and also in their curricula. So we really should open our eyes and learn from the indigenous knowledges, indigenous communities. And then this global citizenship education, otherwise by Andreotti and Stein, is something that we have implemented in our Education for Emergencies project, thinking about how the planetary citizenship, it's not only enough that we have the cognitive knowledge, but we have to somehow also, it has to somehow become to our skin, to our emotions through the education. And in some sense, when we think of this pedagogy for the planetary well-being or climate change pedagogy, we need to also become aware how the students relate to this kind of the cognitive knowledge that is provided for the students, so that the teachers actually understand and know also the students' lives, and also that the curriculum supports the work of the teachers. And in that sense, like the ecological and economic justice are equally important, and this kind of a cycle of a ecological, cognitive, affective, relational, economic justice is something that is important in relation to the planetary well-being for teacher education or the climate change pedagogy. So I will jump into my conclusions, well, not conclusions, but talking about the next steps, and possibly why I am here talking in this seminar today is that we have this small gentle funding which we will take on with Anu and Shashita, who are there in the seminar, and together with our colleagues in Ghana, and look into the teachers, how the teachers relate and understand the climate change pedagogy. And these are the research questions that we are taking on and trying to find answers with the next step jointly together with these 3 countries, Finland, India, and Ghana. Thank you very much. I'll stop here so that I don't take more time.